Shinji and Warhammer40k, Chapter 40, The Coming Storm, Part 2. Mana and Rei was calm. That wasn't unexpected. Mana Kirishima wasn't, and that wasn't unexpected either. The odd thing was that Unit 0 was the one about to get hit by 12 enemy Evangelions, while Magnell's Tancred was safely hidden away. Their feelings should normally be the other way around, but then they weren't normal people. Mana growled. The land dreadnought rubbed the tips of its punches together and sparks flew at the contact. "This isn't right," she muttered crossly. "We're designed to play bait. You don't use the thing with the giant sniper rifle to draw in the enemy." "The bait has to be valuable in the first place, ma'am," Corporal Nagato, the gunner, very reluctantly spoke up. Kirishima could get shooty when irritated, but was even more adamant about not having any rule-bound, unimaginative gearheads in her crew. Military action depended upon a web of information-gathering assets, from scouts to monitoring devices, and through the ages lethality went hand in hand with being able to see and lay the smackdown on the enemy before they could do the same to you. And then suddenly, nothing. The ability to take data across continents, to hurl lightning into the airless void, all gone as the skies screamed. She could feel it. It was more than just any Angel's AT field jamming. Electrons were sluggish. Magnell's Tancred felt heavy in her arms. Back at Cerberus Base, there was a frantic effort to reclaim command, control and communications. Nasuno, the granite-faced base commander, had managed to do quite well even with such luminaries as Yang, Ikari and now Katsuragi looming over his shoulder. He could have been resentful, or depressed, or slavish to protocol. Then in a blinding epiphany, sometime around, he realised that he didn't have to deal with crazy shit unless he was so ordered. Let others higher up on the totem pole think and lose sleep about whatever may. He was no Yamamoto, or MacArthur, or even Napoleon. Trying to be remembered by history when it could all end in the next few hours was just silly. He had a job to do. He was relieved to see Yang arrive at the control centre, two of the Saikana in tow. The adepts wore non-threatening tan uniforms with a faintly Grecian short cape, and had features non-indicative of their ancestry, unlined faces non-indicative of age. They looked worried. Yang looked hungover. The former admiral didn't look surprised to see so many blank screens. "Most active methods of detection rely on throwing energy at something and seeing what bounces back." Yang stared up at the yellow sky on the main screen. "Computers are down too, I assume?" Colonel Nasuno swept an arm around. "Now's locked out again. Some of the displays are still working, but we can't send anything. I've been told this isn't a hacking attempt." "We too are blind," one of the Saikan added, "since time and distance are meaningless to telepathy. This is disturbing." The general collapsed back onto his seat and groaned. "You all are messing with the laws of nature again. I didn't sign up for this. It's probably why Akira went back to the Atsugi base. Hell, I shouldn't have to deal with Ada." "Fine. Tell me you have a solution so we can fight." There was a loud bleep, and the main screen split into 3 windows. The first showed Unit 0, viewed from halfway down its hill. The other showed Magnell's Tancred at shoulder level. The row of smaller windows at the bottom showed how it was accomplished. A group of soldiers with a microwave pulse transceiver waved at the camera. "Systems beyond a certain threshold of complexity aren't working. Things have gone quantum again. If we have observers at both ends, we can at least serve as a relay between them." He didn't need to add the stupid risks involved with that. The soldiers would try it anyway. Unit 0's massive bulk contained a battery of sensors. Its head was moulded into a protruding horn, and its thick, powerful arms carried heat sinks and power cells beneath yellow layers of ablative armour. It was the sole source of sensory information for both Nerve and the Unig. Rei looked up at the sky. Everyone had bad memories of a white armoured Ava. Now there were 12, and by the ease by which they flew, they all had S2 engines too. "Oh, we're in trouble," Mana whispered. "Yang-sensei?" "If we had control of the positron cannon roosts, it might be possible. It's going to take more than a few minutes to break into them and switch over to manual control, and that would only work for the outer ring of turrets. Half of which were on the other side of the city. Damn Nerve and their obsession with being in control." Nerve and the Magi going under was again not unexpected. He wasn't alone in thinking granting so much control to a computer was wise. The Magi was no Skynet, but as expected it could do a lot of damage when turned against its makers. Ayanami and Katsuragi were talking. Something about a plan? Sure, what the hell, let's go with that. We must synchronize, Rei said to Mana. The land dreadnought kept its hard-mount positron cannon. You must fire a sustained beam at this vector at the precise moment I do. Ooh, I see what your plan is. Hey, wait, did you do the math for this? The probabilities will align, or the potentialities will be destroyed for great justice. Ayanami was just a smidgen away from smiling openly. It wasn't good. She'd never really gotten the trick about pre-battle banter, only the vague idea that certain words like justice, freedom, honour and revenge were human emotional triggers. I am unable to form a sufficiently dense AT field for defence. We have no other option. We will end them, and quickly. One did not have to hear deranged cackling laughter. Ayanami Rei doesn't do that. A voice very much like hers whispered, commencing primary ignition. Steam bellowed out from vents all over Unit 0. Pylons snapped out from its back, like bones of wings. Its single eye glowed red. The official designation of Unit 0 in Japanese publications was Zero Goki. The new modules turned it into Zero Dio, meaning Great King, and hence Ada's pun, the O. It rested upon a firing station up on the hill, and the mounds of capacitor banks, armoured buttresses and charging sockets did look sufficiently throne-like. The horn on its head rose to a peak, like an old Heian-era tall hat. The ponderous chestplate and fluted armoured skirts were styled as unto the armour of ancient warlords. 4 minutes and 15 seconds till the critical point. Magnos Tancred stepped backwards and slammed itself into a plain-looking building. Their face opened up and various mysterious mechanisms slid into place. It wasn't like the Avas had a monopoly on modularity. Dino films connected, Mayabuki's voice sample proclaimed. Mega fast as I go. The Trident Land Dreadnought lurched out, trying to keep balance. Voltage at maximum. Let's go! Mana had far less restraint when it comes to maniacal cackling. 3 minutes, 1 second till firing point. Tap, 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 tap. Tap, tap. The girl's fingers lightly stroked their triggers. On an artificial island in the middle of Lake Ashino, Raka drummed upon a control panel. 12 enemy Evangelions. Where did they come from? Does it mean they were being attacked by fellow humans? Unfortunately, that didn't really come as much of a surprise. If anything could go wrong, it would happen at Tokyo 3. 2 seconds. Tap, tap. Wreak havoc! A blinding light lanced out from Lake Ashino. At very nearly the same moment, Rei fired her dual-heavy positron cannon. The twin beams met the single large positron stream, and a collision of magnetic fields broke them into 3 wildly diverging shots. In the O's left hand, Rei had the Ava positron rifle, less power but faster refire rate. She held the trigger down and the beam shot out at a 90-degree angle to the dual beam in her right. That shot met the positron stream from Tancred and was likewise deflected. So rapid was the sequence of events that a breep tone rang through the air, the shockwaves melting together, ripples in a pond turning into a muddled swell. Positron streams were antimatter electrons. Unlike the homing laser, they couldn't be split. They could combine. 2 positron shots met at a steep angle, enough so that their magnetic fields could mesh, and sharply became one stronger beam lancing upwards. It speared a Mass Production Eva. Before the rest could react, 2 more streams raked across the sky, met, deflected each other, and blasted through another 2. It was abrupt. 4 shots turned into a confusing web of crisscrossing lines, then the thickest beam was converged upon by all the rest, and shot upwards, past the enemy Avas, out through the atmosphere. The beams faded. A second later, all saw an explosion near the moon's south pole. For it to be visible from such a distance, someone out there was not happy. Zero Goku Dio was built to duel the moon. She won. Though not as powerful in its long-range attack as the Ashino Lance Cannon, which was built to duel things halfway across the solar system, at the very least she was mobile enough to avoid counter-battery fire. How mobile? Rei exhaled and slid the Gargant Moonbiter back into its recharging rack. Steam hissed again from her shoulder vents. She pointed the positron rifle in her left arm over her shoulder, and fired. An MP Ava trying to swoop in from behind got its head blown off. She dropped the drained weapon and picked up an autogun with each hand. Barriers up. She sounded bored. An enemy Ava leapt from cover with impossible speed and slammed face first into a defensive metal wall. There was a visible dent at the side facing her. Barriers down. Rei casually pointed with her left hand and shot the twitching at the back of the neck, near the entry plug. It lay still. She flicked a glance at the sky. There were no more Evangelions there. She barely had time to react, bringing her two arms together to block an overhead stab by one of those hideously impractical double-headed cleavers the enemy carried. Hidden arm. Armour at her Ava's chest blew, and perfectly normal orange-coloured arms emerged, a prog knife in each hand. The big bulky arms were robotic replacements. Zero Goki was so huge that anything else would be proportionally useless, except at extremely close range. She stabbed at its chest, dug out its armour and pierced its core. The enemy slumped, dead. Two more were diving at her. Boosters on. She leapt and skimmed across the street below, the verniers all over her old-type equipment more than capable of overcoming the mass of an Ava. Clearly the enemy had expected something so big would be so agile. The two MP Avas screeched and flapped their wings and barely managed to keep from slamming into each other. Sliding backwards, hovering a metre or so above the pavement, Rei peppered the two with dual-wielded autoguns at full auto. The O did not mean Omega. It was also a pun on Zero, and a circle, the closed loop with no beginning or end. A support weapons platform like Unit 0 didn't need outright speed and agility, as Unit 2, nor thick armour and stabby implements as Unit 1. It did need some measure of agility to shift firing positions quickly, and any enemy that thought a sniper would be easy prey in close combat would be in for a rude surprise. Their armour is weaker than our Evangelions, she noted to Kirishima. Do not give them a chance to regenerate. Of course! One of the downed MP-Avas got up woozily, a smoking hole still visible on its stomach. Tancred drill punch! Nasuno rubbed at his forehead. Why do I let Ada talk me into these fangs? Fists were inefficient. The large pointed drill in the trident's roaring right arm slid between the cracks of its armour and into its core. The enemy spasmed wildly and slumped. There was a flash, and Mana blocked a swing from another MP Ava. Her left arm contained a 3-bit crushing drill. Sparks flew. The enemy's Ava was knocked out of its hands. Showing unprecedented wisdom, the right Ava turned and ran. Oh, no you don't! She triggered her jetpacks and tackled the enemy. Tancred rocket drill punch! The enemy tried to raise an AT field. Black threads on Tancred's pointed drill sparked with shards of lightning, breaking through. The MP Ava slammed face first into the pavement. The piercing drill bored an exploratory hole again right where the pilot's plug should be, while the crushing drill turned its insides into so much mush until it found and cracked the core. Mana gasped for breath. If the thing was piloted, she'd just murdered some poor fool. She felt secure that these were infested enemies like Unit 4, for no human pilot would actually be so stupid as to attack Tokyo 3's undefeated defenders head-on. There was a loud clang and the Trident crew jerked in their seats. One of the enemy had thrown its double-headed cleaver, and Magnos Tancred now had an exact replica of the lance of Longinus poking out of its chest, just barely missing its reactor. Considering the lance was about 1.5 times longer than an Ava was tall, it was a bother. But not enough of one. After all, even if the reactor is damaged, it was a fusion reactor. It wouldn't be catastrophic, and there was enough reserve power in the batteries for fighting a while longer. Magnos Tancred doesn't bleed. Magnos Tancred doesn't know pain, and they'd just given Magnos Tancred a weapon capable of effortlessly going through any AT field, past their armour, and nullifying regenerative abilities. Its face was featureless other than the thick red lips. It did manage to somehow evoke an "I has a sad" expression. That Ava leapt from its perch on top of Tokyo 3's tallest building and looked for Unit 0 instead. Unfortunately, it found it. It thrust down the street, a roaring buzzsaw blade at the end of its larger arms. Sparks and splut, and then the white Ava was in pieces. A spike popped out from the elbow joint, and Unit 0 rammed it into the exposed core of the newly quadriplegic enemy. Across the street, a similar Ava screeched in pain as the land dreadnought impaled it with the lance impaled in its chest upon a shopping mall. Slowly, Mana pushed forward, the building behind the enemy bringing it closer. One drill punch and it was done. She felt slightly guilty about staining all those pretty dresses with noxious violet goop. The enemy started with 12. Now there were 5. Less than 90 seconds had passed. Not once had Rei needed to use the AT field. In fact, she could not. Mana gave the fallen enemy Ava a few spiteful kicks. "Try and regenerate from that, dirtbags! Ha! Once and forever! The champions!" "We have rocked them," Rei agreed. That right there," Yang mumbled. "And that is why I don't even plan anything under 30 minutes and between 2 days and 3 months. Trying to apply some sort of intricate conniving plot to this place is the height of idiocy." There was a brief quake that knocked dust loose even from the underground bunker of Cerberus base. "The enemy has blasted through into the geofront," Rei reported tonelessly. "They no longer intend to delay us here on the surface." The girls had accomplished 3 objectives. First, to destroy whatever is on the moon that is the source of this strangeness with our electronics. Second, to cut down on the enemy numbers. Third, to quickly open a ray into the geofront to catch the enemy in a pincer. The strategist scratched his unkempt hair again. In less than a minute and a half. "I don't know if I'll feel between knowing they planned this in advance, or if they're making it up as they go along." 5 against 1. Colonel Asuno shook his head. "The poor bastards." Shinji was not worried. He was the last line of defence, alone under the shell of the geofront. A complicated array of mirrors and lenses gave the underground the illusion of daylight. 6 kilometres all around, and 9/10 of one to the roof. That was good enough fighting room, even for giants such as the Evangelion. The power flow shut off with a click, and his Ava's monitors switched from direct feed to the capacitors round his head. He got up and began to walk away from the guard position in front of the pyramidal central dogma, towards the underground lake. He watched the rippling on its surface. There was a bright point of light that burst to reveal a shape vaguely Evangelion-shaped. It had a certain insectoid air about it, perhaps due to limbs that were just slightly too long and bent at slightly wrong angles. It was matte black with red here and there, a horned head yet somehow shaped like the points of a jester's cap. Its 6 bulbous rings folded in and over its torso, like a cape. It rested upon the surface of the waters. "Nagisa, you must really have a death wish." The bundled power lines leading to Unit 1's back, like a long cloak train, blew off to give it freedom of motion. The purple Ava's eyes flashed and steam hissed out of vents in its armour. "I'm not here to fight you, Ikari-kun." "Really? Too bad." Shinji cracked his knuckles. "You dared to show your face. I'll do violence to it." Unit 1 lifted the massive autocannon in its left arm and sent a stream of hellfire bolts into the air. Kaworu sighed. His warborn vanished just before the attack hit and faded back into existence somewhere behind the Ava. The Ava had to completely turn around, what with being unable to move its head and all. "Not using the AT field today, Nagisa?" "What? No lightning, Ikari? What's wrong? Afraid I'll redirect it?" Eterna shrugged visibly. "I can always throw it back." "And so on and so forth until we have an explosive plasma loop." Kaworu gestured to the shell of the geofront. "It is bad for the environment." Shinji had to agree. That was partly the reason his choice of weapons were powerful but short-ranged. Heavy positron cannons, such as that of the Gargant or Tancred carried, would just blast right through the roof and devastate his city. It wasn't as if Nagisa was being uncharacteristically considerate, however. Everything he did had a purpose, and a rapid conquest of most of Europe proved his willingness for merciless initiative. It was the first time they'd ever faced it in Evangelion-scale combat. Previous battles were hand-to-hand, quite painful and inconclusive. The limits of their own bodies too great to force a conclusion. With Evangelion and the Trident Warborn, no, that was an angel in the form of a trident, easily equal to his Unit 1, and perhaps even superior in that it possessed an S2 engine. Shinji Ikari was no longer calm. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to roar. There was something different about Nagisa and his Warborn. An Evangelion may be capable of surprising bursts of speed, but moving thousands of tons of war machine built up a lot of momentum, of energy, and it likewise took energy in the minute applications of the AT field to provide true agility. It was why Asuka's Titanicus modules were far lighter than the others, providing very little in terms of exoskeletal strength boost or protection. Speed, ferocity, all consuming in its power. Like fire. Rei, even if her Ava had an S2 engine, had accepted she would never really reach that. That was why her heavy weapons compensated for a relatively low but very dependable sink ratio, and made efficient use of Unit Zero's own paltry power reserves. Rocket packs and the Ayanami kick notwithstanding. Shinji reflexively rubbed at his left cheek. He flicked the view to infrared. A hot wash emerged from around the Warborn's feet. Ah, so the wings had a reason other than style points for folding up like a cape. The tips served as veneers to aid movement. 2 in the front, 2 at the back, 1 at each side. That was strange. Nagisa was being considerate to physics. It was also likely that whatever was powering those thrusters, enough to lift something massing thousands of tons at a dead hover like that, should be quite insane. Inwardly, the boy wondered how Dr. Akagi would have taken that. But it's all internal. There was still the teleporting trick. Nagisa liked that. Speed beyond speed, but that was a machine god so obviously optimized to fight against Eternus. Shinji carried the first and full Titanicus gear, not as much defense or power as the other 2 patterns, but nor the weaknesses of either. The only way through should be with brute force. Why isn't he using the AT field? It's not as if he has to conserve power like I do. What trickery is he up to this time? It was the traditional phase of battle called the pre-fight banter, and it did serve a purpose. The blink and you'll miss it snap of his attack, and the relaxed ease with which Nagisa escaped, spoke volumes on how much they had practiced and planned for their eventual conflict. So much so that, like in cliched old martial arts movies, they were unwilling to begin. They could stare at each other for minutes, even up to an hour. The intensity wouldn't abate. It might as well have been... Misato Gatsuragi's voice broke into the tension. "Oh, for God's sake! Stop ogling each other and..." Flash, flash, boom! Nagisa's Warborn appeared behind Unit 1 with a flash of yellow light, and its right arm had inexplicably formed into a scythe-like blade. One of the Ava's shoulder pylons was sheared off, but it had managed to bend forward fast enough to keep from being bisected. With its left foot as the fulcrum, the Ava kicked up with its right foot as the counterweight, chopping blades roaring at its heels. The Warborn leaned back just as quickly, but got clipped on the chin. It vanished with another yellow flash. Principio Eternus fell face first into the dirt. The Warborn reappeared some distance away and promptly sank into the lake. Even those down at the command centre found they had no words. By the way the 2 boys harped on and on about beating each other's heads in, they had expected the inevitable moment of their encounter to be something monumental. Epic, historic, in no way as lame as that which they had just witnessed. Shinji pushed his Ava back to its feet and tapped dirt clods out of the grills on its face armour. Nagisa sloshed out of the lake. "Well, that was pointless," the hybrid remarked dully. "And somehow I'm not surprised that you have chainsaw feet now. Your command of the obvious is, as always, obvious." Shinji had deployed the wrist-mounted positron blaster in his left arm and fired, right at saying the word, "duh." Kaworu tilted his head slightly and felt slight heat as the beams passed. The hybrid had to admit to himself he had a tendency towards the theatrical. But Shinji Ikari encouraged banter just so his enemies would get distracted and get sucker-punched in the middle of a speech. The Trident Warborn vanished. There was a boom, a visible shockwave, and Unit 1 was flying through the air. Shinji grit his teeth. Speed beyond speed, huh? It didn't matter how powerful one is if the enemy could simply move faster than he can react. Like the perfect spear. It was funny in a way. Impact force was influenced by both mass and velocity. Getting punched by something massing thousands of tons at past Mach 6 hurt. He flipped over and made the Ava land on its feet. Its fingers dug into the soil as it tried to control its skidding halt. The armour on Unit 1's braces flaked off. "I'm the shield. Lead me to where I may stand against the many," he said with a feral grin. The impact had actually managed to knock a few of the shoulder attachments out of their sockets. "Air mines! Launch!" Sawyer was known for being able to blow through enemy defences. Ayanami was able to finesse her way to victory, doing the most with the least effort. Ikari had always been famed upon for his unorthodox command of the AT field. Nerve thought it was premature to make a piloting manual for the Avas, but the dedicated researcher might pick up the bones of it from simulation logs with the Magi, Asuka's emailed advice to Mayumi, and Dr. Akagi's paper titled Interaction Between Fields of Altered Space and the Planetary Electromagnetic. Canisters on Unit 1's shoulders and back shot off and exploded, spraying the immediate area with solid steel balls, each 20 centimetres wide. The pellets were too large for anti-infantry work, but had too little velocity to damage Ava-scale enemies. There was a keening sound. The steel pellets stopped in mid-air. It was much more effective to use the field to induce other fields. There was a ripping noise, and spiralling blue trails through the air, and Kaworu felt immense pain in his left upper arm. Right, of course. If you can control lightning, you can induce electromagnetism. He teleported again. He reappeared and felt something bite at his neck and torso. The Warborn crossed its arms together and for the first time deployed its field. The best defense is a good offense, Ikari-kun? The pellets were like little fireflies fluttering around the living mountain. There'd be no predicting which one of those pellets would be attacking, and as such near impossible to dodge. Teleporting all over the place wouldn't help quite as much, for he could also attack from any angle. Oh, fun. Unit 1 stomped its right foot down, with its right arm held out and tilting down. Its left arm was bent up and held above its head. The steel balls began to spin rapidly around it, looking like three wobbling, glowing silver wings. The jester-like trident Warborn vanished and reappeared directly above the Ava. There was another ripping noise, and a silver thread followed up. An explosion bloomed off the enemy's shoulders well before it arrived. Hypersonic particles were, after all, faster than sound. The silvery material, like liquid fire, was real wrought lightning. The ruddy red glow of an AT field pushed against air in the way. There was a brief flicker and a great, earth-shattering boom. The geofront quivered. Dust choked the view. Two roaring figures stumbled out of the dust cloud, grappled, trying to punch each other in the head as fast as possible, as hard as possible, before breaking off contact with a neck-snapping cross-counter. They crashed and rolled away from each other. Shinji Ikari rubbed at his neck. If you can't focus your AT field away from your body, use it as the attack, as expected from someone with the luxury of an S2 engine. As I've said, it was not my intent to fight you. Yes, by your perspective it might be that I've committed great crimes or acts of war, but it's most unreasonable not to take the hand of truce when it is offered. You're a blight upon humanity, Nagisa. There can be no peace. There can be no forgiveness. Oh, come now. Considering my absolute mastery with biotechnology, this little war of ours could have been much... Dodge. Messier. I understand that some might find the process and risk of zombification frightening. Ultimately, evade. The symbiotes are expressions of life, not death. If I really wanted to kill millions, then releasing a persistent supervirus would clean things up nicely. He looked smug. The Ava still required technicians to at least plug it into the power sockets. All things considered, I've been very merciful indeed. What you call mercy, others tend to call slavery. Oh, please, like you're any different. All I've done is short-circuit the process of coercion to the satisfaction of all parties involved. Unit 1 had stopped firing, and a very disdainful snort passed through the comms. Kaworu frowned. The difference between a prison and my biochemical triggers is that the former punishes by robbing him of his free will for some years, at cost to society, and has a less than reliable rate of being reformed. The minder symbiote rewards him with bliss for accomplishing tasks, pain for deviating from the policy, and allows him to be a productive member of society all the while. The same symbiote also improves health, adds telepathic ability, and the physical capacity to adapt to changing environments. It's what people would try anyway with cybernetics, only available today instead of 50 or 100 years from now. Yes, you speak of the end of human history. It's the symbiote that does these things, not humanity. You will not set us free, but trap us into depending on something we never really needed. Humanity is defined by its function, not its form. It defines itself. The genome is supremely adaptable. It doesn't matter what shape we wear, now or in the future. The shape of man is sacred. The form of man is for man alone. Let everyone who wishes to live as a human, with his limits and his laws, be treated as a human being. Our shape may change, yes, in time, but let us change the universe to suit ourselves, not ourselves into the demands of space and life beyond, for that way lies surrender. No, Nagisa, humanity is defined by its will to keep going, proudly on, stubborn, free, and unbreakable. Arrogance! Arrogance and self-worship. You would let worlds burn to light up the pages of human history. wars are interesting until you have to live in one. You should already know how wasteful this is. Cowardice! Cowardice and even more self-indulgence. We won't change just for the sake of change. We won't yield to pressures of mere environment. We'll master everything, including our own impulses. We're not that weak. Where there's a barrier, we'll break through. Who the hell do you think we are? Kaworu looked nonplussed. Deranged fools. Obviously. If I don't end you here, we'll keep this argument going long after this galaxy merges with Andromeda. Do you think I can't foresee you trying to Von Neumann your way into victory? Since Adam would refuse to merge your consciousness with the vastly inferior symbiote, you would stand as the last human, while others shift into wild forms. No way in hell am I going to let that wrongness happen. Besides, you made her cry. Die! Ah, okay. That I can accept. Two giant forms flickered. There was another loud crack of collision and dust rising from disturbed earth. Kaworu shot back up into the air, but from the dust cloud silvery strings whipped out and wrapped around one of the wing pylons. He increased power to the engines, and that only caused the filament strings to tighten, eventually cutting into and shredding the thruster. More loops flashed out, and the eyes on his twin-horned head flashed. Steel wire, even if laced and guided by an AT field, could burn. He detached two of his wing pylons and the things unfolded like wrong-facing umbrellas. The front end glittered between the spokes and suddenly were filled by a black sphere. The long portion was a gun, with control verniers here and there. Unit 1 emerged, scanning left and right. It was surprised to get shot from the enemy by its own shadow. Then from the side, there was no enemy it could see. Shinji looked closely and saw black discs running along the ground, like miniature versions of the Dirac Sea. Experimentally, he shot at one. As expected, though the ground beneath it may have been destroyed, the disc remained. It may even be trapping and charging up on the energies attacking it. Interesting. I was expecting something like a funnel attack. Range and speed had its advantages. It was why he had copied Laylor's Gauss field trick. Finally, he gave up and chuckled. You found a worthy vessel at last. It's true. Power has its price, but you don't have to pay that price. The sacrifice of others would do just as well. Was it worth it? Tell me, you bastard! Tell me how you intend to stand alone! Steam hissed from vents in Principio Eternus' armour. Tell me its name! Where once I knelt as a slave, I now wield my bonds as my weapon. This world is corrupt, but I'm not ready to give up on it yet. I am no doctor to heal the world, but the future will not be stolen from it. I will be its master of fate, the captain of its soul. I am the serpent of time. Behold! Something emerged from the Warborn's outstretched hand. For a moment, Shinji feared it was the device misnamed as the Lance of Longinus, something which he couldn't block or counter or evade. Then saw that instead of a bident, it had 3 prongs. A trident. That which separates the firmament, undefeated of the West! Tridens Dominatus fell down. Principio Eternus had shot it in the face while it was posturing. Damn you, Ikari, I fell for it again! You flaming hypocrite! Wham! The dent in the Warborn's face popped back out, and ruesily, Nagisa got back to his feet. He twisted Trident Dominatus' head around until it faced front again. A distant voice screamed hoarsely with despair. Master. There it is again. Where is that coming from? Kaworu wondered. Master. Master. Really? He had that thought it was some echo in the cradle mind, but... Trident Master. Master. The undefeated of north, south, east, west, and centre. Screw you! Kaworu scoffed and looked up. He had more important things to worry about. If there was anything his association with Ikari had taught him, it was that with great power comes great insanity. And with even more insanity, more power. Another clash. Too fast for the eye to follow. Both war machines slid to a stop, pivoting even as their feet tore into the ground to warily face each other. They stopped at a crouch, ready to leap back into the assault. Damn it, Ikari! Do you have any part of your body that does not employ a chainsaw or prog blade? Shinji gasped, exhausted. He held up the left pinky finger of his Ava. White-hot flame burst forth from it. Or shoot fire. Do you have any part of your body that does not employ a chainsaw or prog blade or shoot fire? Nagisa realized how ridiculous this question was. No, of course not. Unit 1 shot him with the turbo lasers on its shoulder. There was another loud boom, and pieces of the geofront roof fell in. SEELE's MP Avas jumped down, and were greeted by the sight of 2 god machines, each trying to break the enemy's face with their own face. Wham! They could actually see the shockwaves from each collision. Unit 1's horn glowed red. It was a head stab. The Trident's 6 eyes glowed bright orange. It was eye-beam time. Wham! The 2 god machines reeled from the self-induced headaches. Living metal closed over deep gouges, and inhuman flesh bulged out from scorched holes. The MP Avas each landed with a loud sploosh into the underground lake, but were ignored. It was puzzling. The 2 machines were too intent on fighting each other that the way to Terminal Dogma was clear. Or apparently so, for one that tried to rush through got nailed by an errant Gauss slug. This caused the remaining MP Avas to focus on an approaching Unit 1. It was damaged. Part of its right upper arm armour was torn off, and its fists were on fire. I don't have time for this, Shinji huffed. I'm giving you bastards this one chance to get the hell out of my city. I'll get to you later. The moon invasion plan was still in the works. It was, of course, Plan 9, to outer space. The MP Avas opened their mouths and showed their tongues like panting dogs. Or was that their equivalent of sarcastic laughter? You really want to get in my way? Fine, I'll take you all on! He slammed both fists together, producing a shower of sparks, and charged. The enemy hissed and did the same, at it from all sides. If Shinji Ikari had a theme song, it would be playing right about now. As Unit 1 ran, it uprooted the tree and jammed it straight down the closest Ava's throat. While it gagged, a faintly humming red blade snapped out from Eternus's right forearm brace and stabbed into the enemy's core. Another enemy Ava attempted to tackle Unit 1, but Shinji fended it off as another large progressive punch dagger propped out of his left arm. The prog blade sparked as it met the enemy's cleaver. Another red blade snapped out from the knee armour, and with a kick he disemboweled the enemy. A third leapt. He whirled about halfway, pulling out the dagger from the first Ava's chest. He caught the newest nemesis in the face with the left hand's prog dagger, and pulled it in like a fish on a hook. With the longer right arm blade he stabbed into the chest armour, and heaved the enemy overhead. It slammed into another MP Ava trying to crawl into position. Both tumbled into the ground. Principio Eternus roared and stopped running. Enemies converged again from all directions, even from above. The forearm blades retracted and were replaced by large hooks. Its horn glowed red. Knives were at its knees and out the joints of its forearms. Its shoulder pylons popped open, exposing ragingly rotating teeth. The MP Avas were throwing faux lances. Without an active AT field to hold onto, the unintelligent device's speed was visible, though just barely. There were brief sparks as Shinji knocked them out of the way. The closest enemy leapt, one arm leading with the other held back to stab with the lance. Unit 1 grabbed that hand and yanked, shoving it into the meat grinder on its shoulders. Bloody red chunks flew out the back vents. The white Ava screamed and tried to pull away. It had to drop the lance just to push against Unit 1, which kept on going despite the weight clinging to its upper torso. Watching from above, Kaworu whistled. Beautiful. While Asuka's ferocity was likewise beautiful in its sheer power, its unpredictable savagery like fire, this lethal intent flowed from one moment to the next, unbroken, a deluge. This was the being Kaworu, a creature both more and less than human, had chosen as his peer in all things. Shunk. Shinji used his Ava's bracer hook to pull the enemy closer and stabbed it through the chest with the horn. He then pushed off the creature, obscuring his vision, to see 2 more of the things already at him. One of them was already damaged, but healing before his eyes. He kicked at one, catching the other's forearms in his hooks. Pulling up and in a circle, he had the enemy pinned and twisted around. He pulled and heard the crack of joints being pulled from their sockets. He jammed the knee blade into the enemy's spine. It slumped down. A punch dagger popped out from his right arm again, and he punched into the entry plug. Orange steam hissed out. The run he'd kicked earlier had recovered, though its face still looked chewed up from the chain teeth on Eternus's toes. Shinji Kari opened his mouth and spat napalm. As the enemy Ava clutched at the burning, mutilated mess that was its face, he managed to put a prog blade on either side of its neck. With a scissoring motion, he decapitated it. He then shoved the bleeding torso into his knee to stab it through the heart. Beyond was one more MP Ava, standing there still untouched. Principio Eternus roared again and retracted its arm blades. This one, it would break by its own hands. It would be on fire as it was torn apart. The Titan stepped thundered up the rise, and it struck. The enemy caught its fist. It hardly budged, despite the massive momentum Unit 1 had built up. It looked no different than the other Mass Production Evangelions. Enough. Bam! A punch to the chest sent the purple Evangelion flying, beyond the carpet of enemy corpses where it started. It face slid into a stop. Steam hissed out again from vents in its armour. It was undamaged, but in shock. Shinji Kari angled its head up. Keel? Mine, Kaworu hissed. Trident's Dominatus vanished. The last MP Ava casually backhanded the blur off to its left. The Trident Warborn was thrown off too, blasted into the ground and bouncing off. Its wing pylons burned to give it controllable descent. Damn! Nagisa picked up a boulder and threw. It bounced off Unit 1's head armor as it was trying to get back to its feet. No, my prey! You've got to be joking. This is the man that directly caused Second Impact. Everything that happened to lead us to this point is this goddamn coward's fault. I will do violence to his spleen. Exactly. Lorenz Keel is, in many ways, my father, my creator, my slave master. Without his specific decision to meddle with things best left buried, I would not have been born. This life, this wretched state, this pain, this misery. I have not asked for this. As a weapon, let me be turned against my maker. I have waited years for this moment. Damn you, Ikari. You will not rob me of my vengeance. 3,692,786,932. Don't ask me how I know, but that's the exact number of people who died in the very first day after impact. Unit 1's eyes glowed. I'm the Fury. I'm the Storm. What say we split the difference 50-50? Whoever gets the most stab wounds in wins. While Unit 1's new Titanicus gear meant it had weapons in the oddest of places, the living metal of Kaworu's Warborn meant its entire body could be turned into a bladed weapon. His claws grew longer, and the tips of his wings sharpened. Sawblade's word. Deal! With bestial roars, they sprang at the source of all their misfortunes. This is a surprising turn of events, Futsuki whispered, sounding completely unsurprised. I thought there were 2 more angels that needed to be dealt with. SEELE seems to be jumping the gun quite a bit. Worry not, Sensei. This is also in the scenario. Oh, come off it, Ikari. You can't possibly use that excuse this time. No way is this part of the prophecy. Believe as you will. Gendo smirked and stood up. I will go secure the lance. Do handle things over here for a while. Nerve Supreme Commander stepped over to the personal lift and descended. Secure it! How? The older man shouted after the retreating form. You can't just leave! Sir! Kozo Futsuki turned to see Masato Katsuragi had moved from her command chair to stand staring at the commander's platform, her posture ramrod straight and her eyes glittering with challenge. They're saying some interesting things down there. Another Angel hybrid pilot that I was never told about is supporting these claims. The fact that Nerve may be playing God and cloning future pilots is the sort of dick move that really doesn't surprise me anymore. But what else are you hiding from me? The implications of what they were saying out there whirled in her mind. She'd never really considered herself too intelligent, perhaps because her standard of measure is Ritsuko, but she'd never considered herself stupid. It was obvious enough. Her boiling outrage. She had to force it aside for the sake of present survival. This was more than just classified information, however. She'd given the old man the respect and courtesy she felt Gendo didn't deserve. But of course he was a liar too. Even her Shinji-kun hid things from her. If information was power, she had enough of being powerless. In a Rei, Ritsuko was lucky she was incapacitated. Misara would have been shaking her forcefully while shouting, "What the hell is going on?" to her face. "Damn it, Akari, you slippery bastard." Futsuki rubbed at his forehead. He had to deal with this instead. Shinji Akari was a thief. This was a subject open to dispute, but not really untrue. After all, most of the assets used to craft the downfall of SEELE were yoinked directly from their coffers. On a more metaphorical sense, there was that he showed up almost literally out of nowhere and had the world following along like a happy little puppy in just a few weeks. SEELE had spent the coin of centuries to get to their positions of power, and some kid just takes it all with a few dramatic gestures? What the hell was that? The people were sheep. Sheep! Oh, they knew it already, but to have it so conclusively proven again. SEELE was pissed. The Instrumentality Committee had deliberated long and hard about revealing their existence, but it was necessary to get to the Lance and prevent Gendo Akari from initiating a controllable third impact. Even he wouldn't dare set Lilith loose upon the world by using Ayanami as the trigger. It was a decision born of necessity. It was nothing personal. But I couldn't deny it felt really good to throw around the young upstarts. "At least Nagisa has a legitimate claim to power," Keel thought as he brushed aside another backstab. The younger Akari had gone so far by letting people think he had aces hidden all over, while hiding how he played without a full deck. "Children, we have gone too far to be stopped by mere children." The room was dark and cold, and made entirely out of metal, and as such incredibly uncomfortable. The reason SEELE no longer showed visuals in their communications was to hide how much they had to cocoon themselves under a dozen layers of fur and thermal wear. It was undignified, and when working for the end of all things, dignity was all they had left. It was odd considering how they crawled on the ground. Unit 1's faceplate meant it had no real expressions, but it had this big gobsmacked look at seeing an enemy that just refused to be put down the same way it defied the odds again and again. Up on the surface, Ayanami and Kirishima would have the same problem, but the saw blades and drills they carried meant their enemies were at least in more manageable chunks. Akari had gone for both power and precision as usual, so his reanimated enemies remained mostly intact. They buried him under the weight of their bodies. Without his creative use of the AT field, all he had was the strength born of desperation. Fortunately, it was enough. "Impossible!" he spat. "Rapid regeneration. Alright, he saw that trick before. Hell, he had done that before. Brain damage? No problem. Missing arm? Stick it back in and in a few seconds it'd be good as new. But it's not supposed to happen without a goddamn core! Nagisa!" Kaworu threw his trident and neatly intercepted a bident foe lance headed for Unit 1's head. He flashed out of existence and reappeared to put himself between the last undamaged MP Ava and Nerve's central dogma. "I'm sure you've read some of the theories that state AT fields altered space to such an extent that they might be considered pocket universes in themselves. It is a latent excuse for having something break physics, but not the universe itself." Shinji had already managed to pull himself free. Akagi-sensei was working on a paper to rebut that idea. "Are you saying they've somehow managed to duplicate the conditions inside an angel's core? Large cutters, engage." Forearm blades popped out again. Snick, snick. That was freaky. Literally anything could happen. Why was it wasted on pathetic zombie imitations? He threw away the arms so the enemies would have a harder time trying to get back on their feet. The arms were trying to crawl back. Damn it, he had no time to poke them all to the point they couldn't move. He looked to the last white Ava. Its stride didn't even slow, even as Kaworu attacked from all points. Maybe, like some sort of network, if I destroyed that core. It was somewhat unnerving to be ignored like he was no threat. It hadn't really been that long since he last felt normal, but it felt like forever. Oh well. His loss. Shinji Akari was not above stabbing someone in the back just to win. Unit 1 moved and stumbled. What the hell? He'd cut off the MP Ava's arms, so they had to trap him between scissored thighs. The problem was that the 4 white Avas had somehow fused their stumps together to become a 6-legged creature, with the 4th Ava embedded face down, its legs bent forward like the pincers of a spider. It waved its crotch at him. Ugh, that's just nasty. He could see the feet breaking free of its own joints, the tips sharpening it out. The creature lunged. Oh shit! What? They can combine now? The cheating bastards! Misato turned to a tactical officer. Do something to help! If we reactivate the defenses, there's nothing we can do to stop them from targeting everything as hostile. It's like... Makoto shook off his glasses as he searched for a suitable word. A fever, I think. The geofront is compromised so deep that burning the infection out is the only way to limit the damage. We need Ritsuko, she replied flatly. Over at Maya's station, Satsukuri Wii tried to hold in her panic. The most she'd expected from Evangelion tactical readouts was to shout out their status and trigger some failsafes. Who expected that somehow that position had grown to include being the Magi expert? It wasn't fair to ask her to perform to a level she'd never been trained to. Misato flicked an outside channel. Shinji-kun, there's something we can do at the moment to help. Looks like you have to combine to keep up. Never! I agree, Kaworu piped in. That shall remain an output-only port. Thank you very much. She grimaced. Yeah, I didn't really want to see that either. Makoto-kun, what do we have? Barriers, recharging stations, all the passive setups. Oh! He began working at his console to update the overhead TAC map. This has potential. If we could just turn them on without tripping all the other active defences. The Magi was active, as those up on the surface still had to deal with the in-place defences without destroying them. Rei's rapid smackdown of multiple enemy Avas was forced less by the timing than having to do it within limited space where she wouldn't be shot in the back. Despite its size, Unit 0 Dio was not capable of tanking as much damage as Tancred, even with the AT field. Why did they not have a big honking gun inside the geofront, as Misato had asked? Because, as Ritsuko explained, it just blow through and collapsed the roof. Nerve's last line of defence therefore relied less on direct fire weapons, such as positron cannons and large-bore guns, than on short-range, area effect weapons, such as missiles and scattershot cannons. And mines. Lots of mines. Even M2 mines. Nerve still had hundreds of the damn things. The minefields had their own proximity detectors. Sure, they also relied on the Magi for targeting profiles, but it wasn't as if avoiding them was particularly difficult. Ritsuko Akagi's thought about self-guiding spider mines got an enthusiastic veto. Ritz-chan, please remember you're supposed to be a biotech expert. RIP! Unit 1's horn was a prog blade. A headbutt straight into the enemy's crotch. Shinji tried not to think about that. Neatly tore it almost in half. The inner portion of his braces split open, each exposing a trio of long rods. He jammed these into the open wound. Activate! Shock Collider! Raw lightning leapt from the contact points and into the combined creature. It twitched uncontrollably and then slumped with smoke curling off its skin. The stench of burnt flesh hung in the air. Shinji watched his power reserves drop from 2 hours to 20 minutes. The fused form of the MP Avas massed about 4 times his own, with a higher centre of gravity. He tackled it by the midsection and pushed. His sync ratio was above 100. He felt the long mandibles scrape at his back, and if he had tried it while the enemy was still aware, would have been impaled several times over. With one last powerful shove, he flung the enemy. It wriggled its feet helplessly as it landed face up. Unit 1 fell face down, hugging the dirt. Then, whoom! The pressure wave filled the geofront's cavity and was contained. Everything vibrated as the force of multiple detonations bounced off the walls. The enemy would find it slightly more difficult to regenerate from bloody chunks. Rods retract! The bracer slid shut. Shinji gasped in exhaustion. He looked up. Trident's Dominatus was battling the last enemy lance to lance, or Biden to Trident. Slowly, Principio Eternus lumbered to join the fray. Punch daggers out! One of his followers had once said that it would be easier to crack the planet than it would be to splinter Shinji's resolve. It was much less hassle to go along, since what he wanted to be done would somehow happen anyway. He was aware of how confident the others played the great game. His father's own sense of confidence was as bitter as it was familiar. No fear at all. Not of death, not of torture, or even failure. But the scenario would well outlive its planner. The battle-hardened will of Ayanami, Soryu, Kirishima, Katsuragi, Yang, and so on, was an active confidence, a thirst for victory, and hesitation was only court defeat. Nagisa too had faith in his purpose, and his self-assurance showed in his grandiose claims that he just dared the world to make him prove it all. But he was not used to being treated with such indifference. The silent, tireless confidence Keel displayed. The old man had no need to prove anything, nor the patience to engage brats in discourse. He had no vulnerabilities to exploit. He had power absolute, but had nothing that he valued. There was no possibility of loss where there was nothing left to lose. This was bad. Shinji had a tendency to mess with his opponent's worldview, and without weaponized battlefield psychotherapy, he only had rip and tear to fall back on. It wasn't working. BAM! Now you understand just how annoying it is to fight someone who alters probability pretty much at will. Unit 1 reeled from the blow, and Shinji Kari felt teeth loosen in his jaw. The Trident Warborn flashed back into existence, slashing at the enemy's back. Concentric red hexagons sprang into being, and a physical backlash flung the Trident away. Thrusters flared to flip the Warborn right side up before it dug a hole in the ground with its face. It just did so with its shoulder. There was a snap as a ring pylon was ripped off its mountings. It grew little centipedal legs and crawled back to reattach itself. The trident homed on its position much like the lance of Longinus would, and landed points down near reach. Really annoying, Kaworu added. He winced as he got up, using his trident like a crutch. Trident's Dominatus was not an Evangelion, but a full-on angel, engineered from the ground up to a specific set of abilities. The first set was to keep Shinji Kari from pulling its face off. The second was to do the same thing even without an active AT field. Is it just me, or does Kill's Ava get stronger the more of its companion Zakari-kun pummels into useless lumps? We would be overwhelmed either way. Clang! Fists met, one reinforced with armour and the other by an AT field. Armour gave way. Instead of following through with the other arm, Unit 1 whirled about and slammed its back onto the enemy. Its weight unbalanced the smaller form of the MP Ava. A curving red blade snapped out of its left elbow and carved into the enemy's side. Abruptly, Shinji felt lightheaded, weightless. Thousands of tons of war machine was free from gravity's influence. Its feet left the ground. He saw the enemy's worm-like face. Uh-oh. Wham! Unit 1 ate dirt. Shinji spat out a tooth and laughed. Trident's Dominatus hovered above, unscathed, looking on with horrified fascination. Evangelions were imperfect human technology melded with blatantly hostile alien biology, and it hurt. And it was the Ava pilots who were all too eager to throw themselves into harm's way. It was irrational. Greatness was sown by the blood of all those who tried the same and failed. It was fed by the fear of those who dared not attempt. Principio Aeternus cut, and bled, and stabbed, and roared, for where it walked there was no past, no future, nothing but the sheer power of its presence. The trident flashed, here and there weakening the enemy with 1,000 cuts, but Shinji Kari and his machine spirit bared their fangs at that which would be God. Its blows were obvious, honest, and while the enemy may evade or block the attack, or the follow-up, or even the ones after that, eventually one would get through. Kill Lorenz felt the flesh tear off from his arm, his bones exposed to the shock of air. Shinji Kari bit through the MP Ava's humerus, feeling marrow oozing out between his jaws. There was an orange flash and again he was hurled away. Titanicus' armour flaked off, its ablative layers almost depleted. Chairman Keel isn't really here, physically, you know, Kaworu noted helpfully. You don't really have to tank that much damage for a hit. Yes, but I'm sure killing his golem would give some really painful feedback. I can't really invade the moon at this point, so I'll take anything to hurt the bastard. The Angel Hybrid nodded. That was pretty much his motivation here as well. SEELE may not be there, but their puppets could still do untold damage. Inside the moon cradle, the architect of Second Impact grimaced and clutched at his shoulder. What has been done cannot be undone. The fruit cannot be returned to the tree. Its seed must be planted. The fire has died. The sword is the key to the gates it guarded. Its fire cannot be rekindled. The way is open now. What once was can be again. A new paradise awaits. Many philosophies flirted with the idea of self-annihilation as a path to enlightenment, be it submerging oneself in the Tao or God's ineffable plan, but SEELE attempted to apply it across an entire species. It was a magnificent surrender, and if the ultimate goal of life was indeed ascension, then there was nothing wrong with leapfrogging past all the usual red tape. The child who had grown to love the enduring strength of life and the bleak glory of humanity's struggles. To him it was monstrous idiocy. The history of humanity was not even close to completion. Much as he might oppose his adversary's worldview, at least the other had a plan for the future. The child born of immortal flesh could sympathise, but felt that humanity didn't really deserve it. Not yet. The Human Instrumentality Committee could be so brave and so frank about their will to power, simply because none of them expected to live through it all. Symbols etched into the ground above flared again. The streets of Tokyo 3 burned. The city was laid out like a chessboard grid, and a pentagram blazed from certain key points. A certain penguin was most annoyed that one such point rested upon the apartment building that held the Katsuragi residence. The carefully tended backyard exploded. The prophecies had changed. Keel's voice echoed all through their minds. It means that we too have changed. The covenant is broken. The promises can no longer be fulfilled. What cannot be given must be taken. Shinji wasn't much impressed. I've seen Father's copy. I've been deliberately trying to contradict it these past few months. He was certain that wasn't what they referred to, though. Kaworu had known this for a long time. In fact, his first thought was to articulate a feeling he had carried ever since his birth. This is wrong. His entire life was dedicated to correcting that wrongness. SEELE was dumping their sins into people's minds. It was pointless for Kozo Futsuki to try and obscure nerve secrets anymore. That's silly talk. Masato looked ill. An international conspiracy-funded nerve dug up the first angel, made the Evangelions, are trying to trigger third impact because the second didn't really go like they wanted, because of some prophecies written down in some random desert by some religious nutcase about a future filled with things he can't understand? Like, say, electronics or the internal combustion engine. It's crazy. It can't be. That sort of thing only happens in cheesy action movies. Regardless, it happens to be true. Oh my god, Misato slumped in her seat. I'm going to have to arrest you, Kaji, and Ritz-chan for crimes against humanity. Then myself. I'll have to arrest myself. Oh god, I finally finished paying off my car and now I'm out of a job. Futsuki shook his head sadly. It's unlikely that God would be much inclined to listen at this point. This cripples Nerve effectively, while they would be free to act as they want. Sawyer would damage the cradle severely, even if she doesn't win. That brought a smile to the old man's face. No, Sawyer will crush them. That leaves no one space-capable. Other than the drive for technologies for practical use, was that the reason no one at all had looked at any further space ability beyond launching satellites? And in two minds? Before impact, there was sufficient support. Likely because SEELE wanted to know how to make the moon cradle livable. The poor astronauts in the International Space Station had simply starved to death after impact. It took 4 years before anyone could launch anything into orbit. The ISS remained an empty, cold husk. He sighed. Your shield of secrets is broken, Gendo. Have you made a scenario for this? What are you going to do now? The door to Ritsuko Akagi's hospital room opened, just as a violent quake rocked all of Tokyo 3. Gendo had to cling to the doorway until it passed. Maya looked up with her expression carefully stilled. Hate was still apparent in her eyes. Sir, why are you here? How is Akagi? Maya bit her lip until she could respond civilly. As you can see, she's still unconscious. Even if she were awake, it would be extremely difficult for her to return to duty. Nerve and spinal damage from the mindworm and the apotoxin blocker she used. She shook her head. Ritsuko-senpai is paralyzed from the neck down. She has become useless then. To your purposes, maybe, Commander. Gendo hid his surprise at how much Shinji was willing to let her know. He wondered how it was that both he and the boy walked the same road, that they ended up at different destinations. There was another distant boom, sending shivers all through the underground. Gendo kept his composure, but within his mind his thoughts were whirling. He didn't really know how to deal with Ibuki. He'd written the young woman off as harmless, and he didn't like having to admit, even to himself, that he had erred. He looked at the defiant young woman, and then to the overlarge pistol she carried. She only tolerated any interaction with him because of the truce with his son. Gendo was sure she was used by the third child in much the same way he used the Kage. The woman even had the same skill sets, except for that last bit of lethality his son seemed to prefer. His nascent plans to have the young woman removed if ever the third child became unruly were shelved. It was too late in the timeline anyway, but it wasn't as if she was invulnerable. He could still destroy her with a few well-chosen words. But he remained silent. What would be the point, really? It was the end game, and his scenario had proven true. Even SEELE had come, trying to deny their inevitable insignificance. She may have helped cause it, but as SEELE had never really been a threat to the scenario, they have all wasted their time. He stepped closer to Ritsuko, moving to the other side of the bed. He reached out and heard the click of a gun's safety being flicked. The bolt pistol aimed at his head had an ejection slit. The gold filigree drew attention to it. With the added initial kick, the bolts would be lethal as soon as they cleared the muzzle. Unconcerned, Gendo reached out to touch Ritsuko's face. Fast as a cobra, Maya's left hand grasped his wrist in a painful grip. "You will not touch her!" "I have already done far more than touch her." Gendo ignored the pain and the faint grinding noise coming from underneath the young woman's uniform. "She is not entirely blameless here, or she would not keep coming back for it again. And again, and again. Every time the monster inside goes back to sleep. I didn't do this. She allows herself to do monstrous acts for the sake of what's something she can't even call love." "I will kill you!" Maya hissed. "You hurt her, and you hurt him so much, and you're nothing. You're not worth his time." Gendo smiled thinly. "There is a monster inside you as well, Ibuki. Go ahead. Feed it." Da! The sound of the primary charge. Ka! The sound of the bolt round exiting the chamber, its rockets flaring in the open air. There was also a soft, ignorable ping as the casing ejected. Gendo watched the deadly projectile approach, and with casual unconcern, moved his head aside. Maya Ibuki was an observer with a different frame of reference, so to her it seemed as if he had dodged a gunshot at point-blank range, a feat she had only seen one other person accomplish. Gendo forced his hand closer to Ritsuko's face. He stroked at her forehead in a surprisingly tender gesture. It would have been much better if she had simply let the symbiote complete its task. Even death would be preferable to this half-state. He looked up. Despite all your efforts, Akagi has remained loyal. Mine. Even as her mind cracked from trying to deal with your abuse of the bedrock of her values. I had need of her, and she was there. Because of her, my scenario cannot be stopped. For that, this is a kindness I can give. As the world ends, let her know she does not die a monster. Ploosh, ploosh! The other Mass Production Evangelions dropped into the underground lake. They remained on fire. Kirishima preferred white phosphorus in her incendiaries. Mutilated forms tried to pull themselves out of the water. No matter how much they were damaged, however, even their blood on the waters flowed back to make them whole again. Torn flesh, too far to reach, dissolved instead into rich red mist. An Evangelion was but as a debased angel. The more efficient one made them, the more angel qualities they possessed. As such, they didn't exist because they had flesh, but in spite of them. The absolute territory was writ into the very walls of their cells. They do not collapse under their own weight, because there was absolutely no probability they would. They couldn't die because they were never really alive in the first place. If Ritsuko Akagi was awake, she would have said, "Masato, it's not that the AT field is actually an entirely different universe. A universe is about frames of reference, and it's like, okay, imagine a pressurized airplane hull. If you take it high up and poke a hole in it, the air rushes out, because the pressure inside is greater than the outside. Bring it underwater and the opposite happens. It's like finding a crack in a singularity. It's nonsense. But an angel core has less nonsense than the air around it, so when an Ava stabs it there, it loses, or gains, coherence and dies, while something like Adam has even more concentrated nonsense than the space around it, so if you stab it in the core, it leaks out and impact happens and, oh lord, what? I'm actually using nonsense as a fundamental force! Maya, unfurl the flags and sound the clarion call for Heisenberg and Schrödinger. Vengeance for Planck and Einstein. We must kill the angels with our mind. Or massed artillery. Senpai, you're doing it again. No, wait. We can use this. A Heisenberg compensator. No, it would mean someone would have to stay awake to observe, and what if he falls unconscious during battle, or gets distracted by boobs? Damn meatbag sensibilities. So I won't reach deep enough. I need something self-propagating. How about those psychers? Note to self. Mind machine interface. Will it persist with brain mapping? Finish scale model magic and find out. A psychic precognitive bolo is vastly more tolerable than that boy's antics. Just have to figure out how to keep from doing the intelligent thing and let someone else deal with this total bullshit. We'd build it so we don't have to. So that's what keeps it from building something else so it doesn't have to. Ad infinitum, a absurdum. Psychic power. Counterpart of the AT field. Quantum simultaneously is nonsense. Something should be two things at different locations at the same time. Quantum tunneling is a drill between energy states. Psychic phenomena is an event. AT fields are objects, ideas. It's a field, so it propagates. What the hell? Am I going to have to fill up my warheads with psychic particles? The monster within Ritsuko Akagi was very angry indeed. In her hospital bed, the woman turned and gave a very relaxed sigh. A jutting tendril of bleached blonde hair swayed from side to side. Up at the geofront surface level, the Mass Production Evangelions had clawed and bit and fused with each other in a writhing orgy of bloody self-mutilation. Their foul lances stabbed them through, serving as contact points in a supporting frame. The winding threads making up each lance unbound and spread out, becoming a spinal column, a central nervous system. Flesh bulged out in new grooves, hardening into carapace. Legs entered into chests and teeth grew at the ends of interlocking arms. Ponderous white breasts jiggled in places that should never have any sexualized characteristics whatsoever. Eyes blinked in places that shouldn't. Shinji had once asked about the gender of the Evangelion. The answer was that since the Eva was grown from an angel, and since angels didn't reproduce through the exchange of genetic material, they naturally have no gender. Unfortunately, this flew in the face of what that looked like giant humans, and that Lilith's body in Terminal Dogma possessed breasts. Breasts that had no nipples and thus somewhat pointless. What if they were like camel humps or something? But LCL was pretty much uterine fluid. Why even have a uterus if it didn't have to carry a child? If so, why were the seeds sent out with godlike beings that were female by default? Where was the other half of the dimorphic pair? Were they like bees, where the queen had ultimate control over life in the colony with the male being there just to implant genetic variants? So why the mammalian traits? The hive insect system was horribly incestuous in mammalian terms. So is a male counterpart supposed to emerge, eventually, from their own bodies like Uranus from the womb of Mother Gaia? What was the point of genetic exchange when one is, effectively, a god? They exist partly as energy. Physics was already their bitch. Yubakari was a geneticist and had been the world's foremost expert in xenobiology, if in secret. She had to deal with those sorts of complications. Constantly. She'd never, unlike Ritsuko Akagi, showed any hint whatsoever of cracking under crazy questions. Always the perfect picture of politeness and poise. Perhaps that was the problem. Shinji Ikari and Kaworu Nagisa wanted to puke, but they were too busy eating dirt. They were known for messing with the laws of nature, but Keel was so much better at it. He had the proper tools. So it was that a localized region of space in the geofront experienced Jovian gravities. It was the boys' own skills in the same craft that kept them from being mush. "This is mostly your fault, you know," Kaworu muttered. "SEELE was bound to attack Nerve eventually. I made sure they couldn't go with conventional forces and pointless loss of life. Yes, they were getting their asses whooped, but he considered it an even trade. So how's it my fault? If you hadn't been so insistent on killing them off and stealing their assets, they wouldn't have had to relocate to the Cradle. The Earth's Cradle was supposed to be mankind's last resort, possessing the best and brightest and most suited to restart the species. Ha! I had to make a deal with Lord Vader. Who did SEELE have working for them? You Ikari, Naoko Akagi, Kyoko Zeppelin Soyu! That's the sort of brain power they utilize. The Cradle basically had everyone they couldn't use, but weren't troublesome enough to just permanently remove. Those would have otherwise looked too close into SEELE's efforts, were put to work on something that would eventually be worthless. SEELE had never entered into a situation where they wouldn't win an advantage with whatever outcome. Earlier, You took them out with surprising ease. We both know they're not morons. They couldn't have kept their farce going for so long if they were incompetent. You were just an out-of-context problem to their experience. This is a war where everyone is forced to either adapt or die. What made you think they wouldn't? The giant combined creature had a faintly beetle-like ovoid central body, with 6 legs each ending in 2 cloven toes. It had 2 oversized arms ending in even larger crab-like pincers. Keel's Ava looked intact, on top of a long stalk-like neck that ended where the Ava's upper torso began. Its right arm was large and muscular, while the left was instead many proportionally correct arms jammed into a single shoulder socket. They wriggled, slim fingers tracing unseen letters in the air. The issue with Revelations was that it was almost entirely metaphor. Babylon was not a woman, though a person may personify a state, such as a nation's head of state. It was unlikely Babylon as a city was being referred to, being buried under sand and gone insignificant in the passing of time. SEELE was big on self-fulfilling prophecies, however. The secret Dead Sea Scrolls were found among others, in the Qumran caves in 1947, and quickly separated because someone already knew what the passages implied. Shinji let his forehead slam into the ground. 12 S2 organs used at the same time. Damn it! The beast opened one of its 6 mouths and began to sing the song that would end the earth.